Wild freak up room, North Sea biting, never bites. Fast water swimming in the girls down in the guys. Fit non see black, you right, fight. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, yelling that night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. Right? Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, Trump out, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fuck the deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. Match bright and high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces focus fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another episode of Mets Hot Stove right here on the channel and on X with a very special guest here today. We got Anthony from Subway To Shea ready to talk Mets with us. And Ant, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'm still trying to figure out if we got this Alex Reyes guy or not. That's what I've been seeing all over Twitter. That's the most news we've gotten since Soto signed about, what was it, a week ago. So now we're just in limbo here, waiting to see when the next move will drop. I know Mets fans are a little antsy, especially after the Yankees' recent, signings and trades, but they're trying to be strategic. They're trying to build depth within the team. Let's see what happens. I mean, we had to trust Stearns just based on the fact that we got to the National League Championship Series last year. So yeah. I trust him.
Yeah, I think he knows what he's doing. But yeah, I mean, look, when you have your crosstown rival doing move after move, it kind of, gets everybody antsy. And, Dave went right with their plan B after they lost Juan Soto. And Alex Reyes, I saw it like over the last, hour or so. Again, he's been injured. He hasn't pitched, I believe, since 2021, if I'm not mistaken. I think I saw somebody put that up on X. And look, this is a guy who was a closer. He has electric stuff, but he hasn't pitched in a while. And I know this ain't one part of the topics because, well, this kind of random news came out of basically nowhere. What are your thoughts about Alex Reyes? And, is it true or not? I know you got your scoops and you got to give it to me here.
Yeah, I wish I had the scoops just like that. The only thing I read was from, I think it was Anthony DiComo saying that he was a part of the team. I don't know if it was last year, but he didn't make it. Obviously, he didn't make it to the majors, but he was like kind of doing rehab with the team at some point. I got to find that tweet. I don't know too much about him, about the fact that he was an all-star closer for the Cardinals at some point. And that's it. It just feels like David Stearns is trying to continue, whether he signs him or not. I mean, we know that he's just trying to accumulate arms to have depth for in case there's any injuries or anything like that. I just would like to see, outside of the acquiring of depth, I want to see some value from these players. I want to see, a lot more usage for the major league roster, because if we know anything that happened last season was that this bullpen fell apart when we got to the postseason. Outside of Edwin Diaz and Ryan Stanek, it pretty much fell apart, and it really cost the Mets an opportunity to get to the World Series.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when it comes to bullpen, right, it's so weird how bullpens year by year change when it comes to just pure stats. You can have the same names in your bullpen. They could be excellent in 2024 and be mediocre in 2025. And that's just the way bullpens are now. And, I keep on saying this on every hot stove. I trust Stearns more than anything else when it comes to the bullpen, because I just feel like you don't need established names all the time throughout your bullpen to have a good bullpen. I mean, the Yankees and Brewers have done that for years, right? Half the guys you can't name in their bullpen, and yet they'll have one of the best ERAs in their bullpen in baseball. So, you got to accumulate arms in a bullpen. Yes, you want a couple of established guys that you actually know of and be like, oh yeah, I know him. He pitched before. Instead of guys that haven't pitched since 2021 and have injuries, and you just hope the pitching lab and David Stearns know what they're doing. And year one, you hope that they continue that trend. But when it comes to just in general with David Stearns' approach, and this is why we're going to get into our topics that we are. The approach seems like when it comes to any type of pitching, long-term deals is not a priority.
Yeah.
For David Stearns. It's not his it's not his stereotype. It's not his plan. It's not his stereotype. It's not his way of doing things running a team. What are your
And that
thoughts
goes all the way back to Milwaukee too. Like it's not just he just came up with this now to do with the Mets. He's done this in Milwaukee when he was their general manager. So this is nothing new for him. And I know that I think, even back when Corbin Burns was looking for a long-term deal, I think there was that little conflict where they wouldn't give it to him and then they had to go to arbitration and all that stuff. Yeah. So this should be no surprise to anyone. The only concern I have is, yes, it worked last season doing this whole thing with Luis Severino and Sean Manaea. But now to take those type of chances, you better make sure that the Clay Holmes, well, actually, I wanted to sign for relief to be a setup man for Edwin, but you better make sure Clay Holmes and Frankie Montas work, because if that doesn't work, I mean, he's gonna hear it. That's for sure.
Sure, yeah, and that's the thing too, right? It's hard to look at the way he ran the Brewers because the owner never gave him money to get those pitchers for long-term deals, or even extend guys like Burns or even Woodrow for that matter. That he couldn't do that because of the owner. I was hoping that since he has the resources now with Steve Cohen, that he would be willing to do that, and it's not going to be a detriment to the team if they sign a Corbin Burns for 8 years, and 3 out of the last 8 years are bad years for Burns, and it's just a garbage contract from year 5 to year 8. But that's what you have to take the risk on. And you saw the Yankees do it. You've seen teams do it over the years. I mean, the Mets done it with Scherzer and Verlander. All the money that they put into pitching, and you would think that there's no set plan on how to win a World Series, right? There's a team like the Dodgers that basically had 50 injuries in their pitching staff. Bullpen. And one on offense, right?
Bullpen games.
Yeah. The Rangers, a couple of years ago, they basically try to get every veteran arm in there. And basically it was Eovaldi who took over the show, and their offense also took over the World Series and the playoffs. So, and then, you'll have a team that can win just by pitching. And so there's not like a steadfast way to win a World Series. You just have to hope their plan works. And I always say this, and you've been a Met fan a long time. We all have been a Met fan a long time. The issue that I always had, no matter who is running things, is that it seems like after they make the playoffs, the following offseason, they don't do enough to get that next level. And I've had that issue throughout my entire Mets fanhood. And I'm not saying that's not going to happen now, because there is a lot of guys on the board that we can still get and have a very good roster going into spring and going into opening day. My issue, before we get into our topics, Ant, is your opinion of why does it seem like every time the Mets have an opportunity to get to that next level, when you got to the NLCS, right? You were 2 games away from the World Series, and offseason's not done yet. But as of right now, December 18th, it seems like they're not going to do enough to have the least amount of question marks possible on opening day. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I am not going to kill Stearns and the Mets right at this moment. Everyone on my wish list is still available.
Correct.
So everyone that I want, Manaea, I want to bring back Alonso. I'd like to bring back Winker and Iglesias. I don't know, talk to Seattle. I want to get Luis Castillo over here in a trade. Roki Sasaki still available. So I'm not going to kill them just yet. And when it comes to Stearns as well, I don't know if he's ever going to get the appreciation from Met fans, because if the Mets make a big deal right? Like they did to get Juan Soto here. It's all because of Steve Cohen. And any of these small deals or small signings, that's all David Stearns. So I have to give credit though that last season they went after Yamamoto for the 12 years for the 325 mil that he wanted for a guy that was what, 26, 27. I don't think they're going to do that for any pitcher that's going 30 and over, which includes a Max Fried, which I think, to me, that's an overpay. And I'm not killing the Yankees. I think the Yankees made the right moves in what they've done so far. But I'm not giving Max Fried. I'm pretty sure you're not giving Max Fried 8 years, 200 mil, knowing what we've seen from him in the NL East, his injury history and all that stuff. Sorry. I would have preferred Corbin Burns. I don't know if they can get him on he's probably not going to take a shorter deal now after seeing that whole Max Fried thing, but there was talks of him possibly going on a 3-year deal with high AV, kind of like what Scherzer got. I'd do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
if you do something like that. Give me shorter years, high AAV. That's something that I would definitely try to do. But I just can't kill right now what they have done or what they haven't done, considering the fact that a lot of the people that I want are still available. The Mets were not going to go after Cody Bellinger, right? They weren't going to go after Max Fried. The only guy that I would have went after was probably Devin Williams.
Yeah.
And that would have been to kind of be a setup man and kind of close when Edwin Diaz couldn't. But now he's going to probably be the closer for the Yankees with, I guess, Luke Weaver, who I think it is, who was closing for them at the World Series. He's going to probably be the setup man. They'll take turns. That's the only guy that I would have traded for outside of Luis Castillo that I would have brought here. But outside of that, I mean, there's still time. Once Pete Alonso goes, like if he goes somewhere else and, Manaya goes somewhere else, then I start to get a little concerned because then outside of that, you have Walker Buehler, who has the potential to kind of be like a Luis Severino, but how many more of those guys can you take? I need some. I definitely need a few more sure things, right? Juan Soto is a sure thing if he stays healthy, right? On paper, Juan Soto is a sure thing. But, Pete Alonso, I think for like 5 years could be, more of a sure thing. But once like you go into the pitching and you start bringing me all these reclamation projects, you look out in Los Angeles and you see the rotation that they're putting together. You got San Diego. You have Atlanta is going to be healthy again. The Phillies are going to want to have payback and revenge on the Mets. I know Stearns is trying to play this game where he's, trying to get and be cool about all this stuff. But at some point, you do have to start getting some major league talent on this team to face off against some of these elite teams that are ahead of you. The Yankees have an absolute easy way to get back to the World Series again now that Houston is out of the way.
Basically.
They just do. Right? Kyle Tucker's gone. I'm pretty sure Framber Valdez is going to get traded at some point in time. It looks like the Astros are retooling again. So they're probably going to be out of the way. I can't buy into Baltimore because they have now shown twice already at home in the postseason. They got swept twice in the wild card series. I can't trust in Baltimore. Who's it going to be? Minnesota's never going to beat the Yankees in the postseason. Yeah. I mean, there's so many teams that won't be able to take care of business against the Yankees. They have an easy route to get back to the World Series, and they got a really good pitching staff now, a really good starting staff.
Yeah, exactly. And, Cleveland is Cleveland. Kansas City, unless they take that big jump or Detroit takes that big jump, I don't see anybody really fighting the Yankees to get back to the World Series. I mean, the Yankees can coast with probably 100 wins and make the playoffs. And I mean, who is the biggest threat? Like, you talked about Baltimore. Baltimore seems like they got the roster. They still don't have the pitching, which still makes no sense to me, considering the fact that you have all these cheap options in your lineup, and yet you don't want to spend money on a rotation that could probably put you close, if not over the top and have a chance of beating the Yankees. But hey, that's not our issue, unfortunately. Oh, not unfortunately, but unfortunately for us, we got to worry about our Mets. And that's the
Yeah,
biggest
fortunately, it's not our issue.
exactly. But the funniest thing is where, I'm okay with reclamation projects in the bullpen. The fourth starter, fifth starter, sixth starter, in this case with the Mets probably going through a six-man rotation. My 1, 2, and 3, I want guys that I know that can go out there every fifth day and have confidence in, right? There's a pretty good chance that our 4th through 6th starter are question marks. Like, that's a fact. Like, if Clay Holmes actually starts the season in the rotation, which I hope he does not, and is our setup man, you got Montaz. Let's say, Peterson is your 4th guy. As good as Peterson was last year, we have no idea if he's going to replicate that throughout an entire season with 150, 160 innings. We don't know that. And I want an ace. I feel like, people are like, oh, aces only go 5 innings now. They don't. All right. I'm talking about established, guaranteed Max Fried, Corbin Burns, Garrett Cole. Right? You can go through the list of guys that are aces of a staff that can give you 6 innings, 2 runs, 7 innings, 2 runs. Guys that do that, not all the time, but more often than not. Those are your stoppers in your rotation. You don't want to go on a 5-6 game losing streak and hope that, the ghost of Manaea from last year comes back and actually does that, right? It's possible, but it is a question mark, right? Manaea hasn't done this in 4 years? It's been a while since he actually looked like a number 1 or definitely number 2. We don't know if he can replicate that with more video on him, more teams understanding what he's trying to do now. Can he adjust to batters adjusting to him? Sure, absolutely. I think he's smart enough. I think the Mets could possibly do that. But to say that, oh, well, Burns is too much money or too many years, and we're not going to give anybody more than a 4-year deal, then you're looking at the tier B guys. You're not going to get a Corbin Burns. You're obviously not going after Max Fried. There's Valdez and Castillo that you can trade for, and Castillo seems like the easiest option considering Stearns, that Castillo deal contract is right up Stearns' alley. It's got 3 years of control, 4th year vesting, it ends up being a little under $100 million overall if that 4th year is vested. That is right up David Stearns' alley. But here's the other issue that when we're talking about the trade market here. Stearns has still not given up top prospects to bring in established players. I'm concerned about that. I know David Stearns says he's willing to do it, but until he does it, I don't trust that he will, regardless of who the player is, position player-wise or pitching-wise. Anthony, I'm going to ask you. You brought up Castillo, you brought up Valdez. If you had an opportunity to get one of those guys, who do you want? And do you think David Stearns can actually give up top prospects to do so? And who do you think those top prospects could be that could be on the move?
Well, when they were in on, was it Garrett Crochet? The breaking point was Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think
they had to give up more than that.
Correct.
It wasn't just those two. It was them and more players. I wasn't so in on Garrett Crochet because he's coming out of it's like Clay Holmes. He's coming out of Clay Holmes with more elite talent. But he's still coming out of the bullpen. You're still going to have to monitor innings. I don't want to have to monitor innings, with everybody. You talked about Corbin Burns. I'll get to the trade market, but I just wanted to bring this up real quick. Corbin Burns, the shortest outing he had all season was 4 innings. You know how many times that happened? Once. All season long. I can count. I think we're going to have to count on both of our hands together how many times the Mets went 4 innings either in 2023 or 2024. The Mets need guys that are going to give them innings. And a guy like Corbin Burns, although I don't know what the years he's asking for and the money, it won't happen. But like that's everyone keeps saying he's on the downward trajectory as well. So I just don't, I don't know what happens with him, but that's the kind of guy you want who's going to give you that kind of, innings. You want if you're going to do this with the bullpen where you're just throwing names in there, you need starting pitching, like you mentioned, at least 2 or 3. You look at the Mets back end of the rotation, and it's a whole lot of kind of ifs and inconsistency.
Yep.
And the Mets need more consistency from their rotation. When they were doing this with the kids back in 2015 and the kids were learning, who was the consistent pitcher in the rotation? Bartolo Colon. Once he left, those kids were like deer in the headlights. So the Mets need some type of consistency, some type of veteran leadership in that rotation to help them. When it comes, I wish I knew a little bit more when it came to Framber Valdez. I know he's been good for the Houston Astros, but man, I've always wanted Luis Castillo to come here, and if they could figure out a way to get him here, I think it was the Mets pod today that did the option 1, option 2, option 3, and the option 2 was intriguing to me because they said something about Castillo. Was it Castillo for Drew Gilbert, like straight up or something, like a trade like that? Someone mentioned Drew Gilbert for Castillo, and I saw that and I was like, I would do that in a heartbeat. I have no allegiance to any prospect in this organization.
You are my friend.
Oh. Absolutely. I am beyond tired of holding on to Fernando Martinez, Lastings Millage, and the list goes on and on of prospects that we have had. You know who's the best prospect we have right now that's shown up and done all the work? Mark Vientos. And where was he ranked? Not high, that's for sure. And he's been our best player. He's been even better and more clutch than Francisco Alvarez, who's the number 1 prospect in all of baseball.
Absolutely. So again, I'm sorry.
Keep going. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, like, that is music to my ears when I hear somebody else say, I don't care about prospects, right? I want established players in here. We have more than enough homegrown talent on this team where you don't need 3 more other top prospects to come up and come up and be something for us, right? If that happens, wonderful. We'll all be happy about that. But you don't need that. I think we fall in love with that aspect of, oh, what if Drew Gilbert is the next, Carlos Beltran? Oh, if the next, Brandon Sproat is the next Jacob deGrom, right? Even though I don't want to trade Sproat, I don't want to trade Gilbert, right? I wouldn't want to. And I do like Drew Gilbert. I think he's going to be a good player, but you're sending him to baseball Siberia if you get Luis Castillo, right? When was the last time Seattle Mariners actually shown any life at all? And even if they do, you'll see him in the World Series if that's the case, right?
Where's Jared Kelenic right now?
Exactly my point, right? I brought that on the last Hot Stove the other day. I said it. I'm like, even though he got Brody Van Wagenen got killed for that deal, it ended up working out in the Mets' favor. Obviously, the Cano contract was garbage, but we got our closer for the next 4, 5, 6 years. And Kelenic is basically, roaming around different teams and kind of latched on with the Braves, but really didn't do much with the Braves. So, and he never became that, that top prospect that everybody was talking about. And the Mets won that deal. And I'm not saying Drew Gilbert can be the next best outfielder in baseball, right? But he is doing it in Seattle. You're not trading him to the Braves or the Phillies or even in the National League for that matter. I think we worry too much. And the prospect hugging needs to get loosened up a little bit because I've said this for years. Too many years from deadlines to off seasons, the Mets have held onto their prospects for whatever reason, whatever thought process they had, to not get an established player. And I think it hurt them during seasons when they needed that extra bat or that extra arm, and they didn't do enough at the deadline or in the offseason. And then when they don't do it in the offseason, they still got to do it at the deadline, and they're still hesitant to do it. And at some point, teams that win the World Series, go back the last 5 years, they did major trade deadline moves to help their team. The needs that they got. And it seemed like the Mets always fall short on that. And I'm sick and tired of it, right? Last time I checked, and I think you're wearing the little zip up that says 1986, right? Been a long time since this Mets team won a World Series, right? There isn't patience anymore. We can't have patience when you got Lindor, most likely Alonso, Nimmo, in the primes of their career, which you'll probably get 3 to 4 of those best years left. You can't waste them after you give these guys contracts. You just can't. And after they get older and they're in their mid-30s, you hope Vientos, Alvarez, Acuna, guys like that step up into those roles that the guys we just talked about. We have to start winning with those guys, because then we're going to have bad contracts with older guys, and you can't get rid of them because most of them got no trade clauses. So what are you going to do? You have to start winning now. At some point, there has to be somebody to put their fist on the table and say, we got to win now. I'm not saying we just have to win next year, but make an attempt to get further than you were, which was obviously a World Series. You got to do more. And with all the question marks that the Mets have on this roster right now, there's guys available that you don't even have to trade for. Even if you don't want to trade for guys and trade your top prospects, there's more than enough guys on a free agent market that is just money and still have your farm system, if that's the route they want to go, that are available. And this whole, I don't want to give long-term deals to pitchers. Well, you can't have both. You can't not give long-term deals to pitchers and not want to give up your prospects. You know what you're going to get? Frankie Montas. That's what you're going to get. Those are the type of pitchers you're going to get in this rotation. Yeah, you might get a Buehler who might be the possibility of showing stuff that he showed a couple of years ago before the injury. Maybe Manaea has a similar year like last year, but that's still ifs. That's still question marks. At some point, they got to do one or the other, and I'm so glad you said that about the prospects. You just don't care. And you brought up Drew Gilbert, who are Mets fans. That's one of their favorites. And I know that's not a popular opinion. Same reason why I get killed for the same reasons that you just brought up about the prospect hugging. It gets to a point where, do you really want to win, or do you really want to complain about winning but not actually win? And it seems like Met fans are falling into that category a lot more often. And we're very established on X more often than not. We see what goes on, right? Anytime you're like, oh, how can you trade Acuna? You know why? Because he's shown a little bit of highlights, but there's no guarantee that Acuna is going to be a guy to put us over the top. Just like the established guy might not, but at least they're trying something to make your team better. And when you got a guy like Acuna, who's probably going to bat in the lower part of the lineup, unless he's going to be the major impact that jolts his team to the next level, you go with the established guy, in my opinion, especially when you already got 400 middle infielders in your farm system, right? Some of them have to be assets at this point, and I'm glad you did say that.
Yeah, and this is why, the Yankees are so smart when it comes to trading their prospects. You ever see any of these Yankee prospects that come in these big deals to bring these big, like the Cody Bellinger trade or the Giancarlo Stanton trade? Have you seen any of those prospects become big time? I haven't. The only one that they've hung on to right now is Jason Dominguez, and that's for a reason.
Yeah.
So, to hold on to all of the prospects, I just don't know if I can continue to do that. I was okay in 2022 when they decided to not trade these guys because I wanted to see what Beatty and Alvarez and Vientos had in them. But we're kind of past that phase. Vientos is now the third baseman in my eyes, unless I guess you sign Bregman or something like that. But Vientos is the third baseman. Beatty should be, tradable. Acuna, after having that good end of the season when he came up, his stock couldn't be any higher, right at this moment. Even in the Venezuelan league right now that he's playing, he's been playing very well. So that's another guy that you would have to consider trading. Drew Gilbert, I would as well. You got Soto now in the outfield. You got Nimmo on one side, you got Soto on the other. And the guy who's going to play center field has to be a defensive wizard to me. And that's what Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor at this moment. And you have Jose Siri tied into the Mets for another couple of years with a good move by David Stearns. This is what is going to really define David Stearns. Not these little signings that he does, these depth outings. It's how he's able to react to trades and the trade deadline, right? He did a very good job at last year's trade deadline, bringing in Stanek, Maton, Jesse Winker, and a couple of others. The beginning season trade with Adrian Hauser obviously didn't work, but we got Tyrone Taylor out of that, so that kind of crossed each other out. But when it's time to make a big trade, Is he going to be ready to pull the trigger? And with the fact that this rotation is kind of in flux right now, like we're kind of back to last offseason where as much as I really wanted to sign Luis Severino, that was my one guy. I was like, oh, Luis Severino, he'd be great for the back end of the rotation. Ended up being pushed all the way to the front of the rotation. But when they brought him, Manaya, and then Senga goes down, and then Quintana's the ace of the staff to start the season, like, I don't want to go through that again. You got to at least give me one pitcher. And obviously, any of these pitchers could get hurt. You could trade for somebody, and he could get hurt in the offseason. But I'd like to have one established pitcher. And if you're telling me that you're not going to pay for a guy like Corbin Burns, you have to at least try to bring in Luis Castillo, or I guess Framber Valdez is even better because he's a southpaw, and he has a way better record than Luis Castillo has. So you got to try to bring in one of these two guys, and definitely work hard on convincing Roki Sasaki to come over here. That especially on that mind, that would help out a lot, because Mets are going to go to a 6-man rotation eventually.
Yeah, exactly. And with Roki Sasaki, I don't think they can plan for Roki Sasaki picking them, because this is what he's doing. He has to choose a team. It's not where Cohen can just show the check and say, here, blank check. What do you want? Right? You can't do that because of the international bonus money that teams are going to have to use for Sasaki. It's basically his choice. And if they're going that route and they're hoping that, or setting up or hoping their whole offseason revolves around Sasaki when it comes to the rotation, that's a bad thing, because he can't sign until January 15 when that new IAF starts to replenish and for New Year and stuff. They can be guys off the board. Burns can sign, Manaya can sign, Buehler can sign. I mean, is it possible that they don't? Sure, but we're about a month away in between that signing period for Sasaki, that they could be off the board. You can't twiddle your thumbs and fold your hands on the table and hope Sasaki signs. Now, if he does, great, but that's only one pitcher. You still got 2 holes in your rotation, and you can sign Jack Flaherty, you can sign somebody else like that, fine, but those guys can come off the board, and you can be left holding the bag. And then what do you do? Right now, you really got to figure out something unique. And could they get Sasaki and then still trade for Luis Castillo? Absolutely. And then you're really set. I think you got a damn good rotation, and you're going into a lot more confident in the rotation than you are on December 18th. So there can be a lot of different aspects. And I see people in the chat talking about, you're not smart, or you're smart if you hold a prospect. Doesn't mean that they're dumb. It's not about being smart at this point. It's about what you have in your farm system that actually makes no sense at this point. You have too much of abundance of middle infielders that all can't play at the same time on your roster. You can't put one in left field, the other one in right field, the other one behind the plate or at second base, and expect all of them to turn out, right? You can't do that, right? We don't need a Daniel Murphy, Lucas Duda experiment in left field, right? We just don't need that again, right? We're trying to win a World Series, right? Last year was the year to experiment that. Right now, you have too many middle infielders that all can't play. Lindor is going to be here for the next 100 years, right? Most likely, even though McNeil is quote unquote the second baseman, you have Mauricio, Acuna, Jet Williams, all fighting for that one spot, including McNeil. So you got 3 guys that for one spot. And I'm not saying trade 2 out of the 3 and get what you need, but you can definitely trade one of them to get what you need. You can trade in Acuna for Luis Castillo, and you still got Mauricio and Jet Williams in your back pocket. Worst case scenario if McNeil fails.
I think the emergence of Mark Vientos has made a lot of these guys that were vying for third base, second base, very expendable, right? Yep. Brett Beatty, Jeff McNeil, I don't think anyone's going to really want. I mean, he's getting older now. He's got 2 years on a big contract for a guy that I don't think is worth that contract. Although, I don't hate Jeff McNeil. I like Jeff McNeil, but I don't know if right now he's worth what he's getting paid for. And then you got Acuna who's rising. Ronnie Mauricio as well. I mean, he could be trade worthy if they could get something from him too. So Mark Vientos being able to play third base right now, and I hope he's able to continue his hitting as well, because he'll stay in the lineup if so.
Mhm.
But him playing third base got better as the season went on. And that makes these other guys very expendable, to the point where now Brett Beatty's playing second base. So now you got all these guys, Colin Huck as well. There's Jet Williams plays the infield and the outfield. A lot of these guys can be moved. And if we could get a starting pitcher out of that, like I would totally be talking right now to Seattle. I'd be talking to Houston. I know someone mentioned Dylan Cease. I don't know if I'm interested in Cease as much as a lot of other people are, but they've got to figure out a way to bring in a 1A, 2A type starter, not someone that's a back end of the rotation, because we have about 5 or 6 of those guys already. Need someone that's going to be stable, because we don't even know if Kodai Senga is durable enough. He got hurt easily last season, and he'd been hurt throughout the whole season. So we just don't know. And I need someone that I know is going to be a durable pitcher. I think Carlos brought up and I don't know if you want to get into the other starters that are available, but Carlos brought up a good contract. I can't remember where it was. I think he said it was like a 4-year deal for a Corbin Burns. 4 years, 45 mil per year. I'd do that.
Sure, absolutely. And
I will give them AAV. I will give them AAV over years in a heartbeat.
Yep.
Give it to a guy like that. You gave it to Scherzer. You gave it to Verlander. Give Corbin Burns the AAV and do it for 4 years. Because at the end of the 4 or 5 years, that's when Soto's got to think about whether he's going to resign or not. And if he, whether he takes, his option or not. Yeah. And if he doesn't, if he goes into free agency, that means he's had the best 4 years of his life as a New York Met. And then our payroll, restarts again, and we can start looking at younger players and stuff like that. So I would definitely offer that type of deal to a Corbin Burns. I don't go above maybe 4 with a 5th year option, but I'm not going 5, 6, 7. No, not for a starting pitcher.
Agree. And that's the interesting thing. Like, why wouldn't the Mets just blurt it out there to Corbin Burns through the media, wherever, offer him, here's 4 years, even if you want to go 5, even if you want to go to the 5th year, say if you want to go 5, 5 years for $45 million a year, why not just throw it out there and see if he says yes? Put pressure on him, right? Because there's a pretty good chance that maybe somebody doesn't give him 7 or 8 years, and he's like, well, why would I take 6 years for $36 million a year when I can get 4 or 5 for $45 million a year? And you know what? Make it interesting. Give him an opt-out after 2, right? Yeah. So he's still in his prime, and if he has a great year, he can opt back out and maybe get another 4-year deal with $40 million. You can do that as well. I don't see why the Mets aren't being creative here. I mean, they might be behind the scenes, and we just don't know.
Well,
but because they don't leak anything.
Yeah. Corbin Burns is the final piece to this offseason that needs to fall for the rest of the pitchers now to get their money. Manaea is going to wait until Burns signs. Yep. So is Jack Flaherty. And so are the rest of these starters. They're all going to be waiting for Corbin Burns to drop. High AAV, short years, and options are the Mets' best friend. That is the way that they should be doing their business, unless it is a unicorn type player, just like Juan Soto. They gave him the years, and he still has an opt-out after 5. They gave him everything he wanted, but he's young. He's only, 26? When you start getting to players that are 29, 30, 31, we'll give you short years, but we'll give you high AAV, and if you want to opt out and try again in a year or 2, you can definitely do that. If they opt out, that means they had the best, years of their life. So, I feel like that needs to be the formula for the Mets when it comes to trying to sign these contracts.
Yeah.
We all know the money's going to be there with Steve Cohen, so you can always offer the money. But now David Stearns needs to get creative with how he does these deals, right? Short term, high AV, like you said, with options. And that I feel like is the easiest way to make these formulas work for the Mets.
Yeah. And, you know, if you put pressure on these players and give them offers, it's perfect. It really is. Like, you put pressure on the player and the agent that you have enough conversations with, because he has basically everybody in free agency. It's a perfect scenario, right? You're not shying away from money at all. It's just the years. And again, there's incentives there that can really, you know, possibly get it done. And I just don't know. Again, the Mets don't leak anything, so it's hard to tell what they're doing and what not they're doing. So we can be getting angry for basically nothing, and they could be all in on Burns, but keeping it extremely quiet. Now, I don't know how they're keeping it extremely quiet with Scott Boras as his agent, but they are, because even the Juan Soto situation, which is very unique, we didn't start to hear offers come out until basically 3 days before he signed.
Yeah.
Like, that's how close to the vest everybody kept their offers. And I do wonder if teams are going to Scott Boras. If you leak anything with our offer, besides telling another team, because obviously he has to do that, he's doing his job. But he goes, if you leak, I think teams are saying, if you leak anything to the media in regards to our offer, take our offer off the table. I wonder if that's being said to Scott Boras now, because multiple times they have not reported any type of offer until basically these offers are starting to be talked about throughout teams and all the media all of a sudden. And then a couple of days later, the player signs. So I do wonder if that's starting to be the case with Scott Boras now and other teams. And I do wonder if the Mets are in on Corbin Burns, but are keeping it close to the vest, because why bid against yourself when you don't have to?
They could be on Corbin Burns. I mean, he has that, you know, unique relationship with David Stearns from their time in Milwaukee. So it's a possibility. We just don't know. And I don't know about you, but I don't mind there not being leaks, because when there are leaks, and what we saw from the Wilpons in the past, it led to a lot of disappointment. And that's why when you're on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and you see fans get upset because there's not signings or nothing, we're hearing nothing, it's because the Wilpons allowed that type of behavior to take place. They wanted you to think they were going after this guy and that guy, and oh, we're going to get A-Rod, and oh, we're not going to go after Harper. They want you to know all these things. Whereas at the Mets, you're not going to know until basically the signing is going to happen, except for, like you said, a unique case in Juan Soto, which there was only really, 4 or 5 teams going to be able to sign him. Yeah. That's a lot with Boras clients. I mean, how many of Boras clients, the top guys that are out there, are going to be able to sign with all these other teams? That's not that, like, it's like the Mets are always going to be involved. The Yankees are going to be involved. Red Sox, Dodgers, Cubs, the usual suspects are going to be involved. It's about like 6 or 7 teams. Outside of that, no one else is involved. Frankie Montas, we didn't even know was going to happen. Clay Holmes came out maybe, I think, a day or two. I think that Joel Sherman had mentioned it a day or two earlier, that he was, you know, the Mets were looking into him, and then they signed him about like a day or two later. Yeah. So the Mets, I don't mind them keeping it close to the vest. I just can't freak out about every rumor that comes out that's being put on X by, you know, John Heyman or all these people, Mike Rodriguez, or Mike Deportes, all these guys coming out with all these rumors. I can't just get up in arms about it. Like I said before, I'm going to keep it cool, because the guys that I still want are still available. And I think that you round out with those guys, and I think the team will be just fine.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You know, because there isn't leaks in the Mets organization anymore, and you know, it was running rampant, as you said, when it came to you know, the Wilpons. Like, they wanted everything out there, and it kind of was a detriment, because it might have hurt them, even if they were trying to get the player, or, you know, faking trying to get the player. It seemed like it was always out there, where, you know, we know the Mets can be in on everybody. It's just not realistic. because, you can't sign everybody. You can't, you could sign everybody on the market. Cohen has all that money, but you got, 26 men on a roster. So you can't really go crazy here. But I do wonder, like, I always felt like Burns is on the Mets radar, but it's so quiet because anytime Steve Cohen is in on a player, that gives leverage to Scott Boras or the agent from other teams. And I think Cohen doesn't want to be used like a bag of potatoes. I don't think he wants to be used anymore. And keeping those leaks internal, and yeah, of course, talking to other teams about the Mets offer is obviously what the agent's job is. But to leak it to the media starts to, get other fan bases mad. Like the Orioles. Say if the Mets, their offer gets leaked about Corbin Burns, you don't think Oriole fans are going to be pissed off saying, why don't you do something? So now it puts pressure on their organization and their front office to maybe up an offer. And now the Mets are in a bidding war. And again, if the Mets have an offer on the table for Burns, why change that offer if nobody's really bidding against you at this point or getting close to you?
Yeah.
And we just don't know, because we can find out tonight that the Mets did offer Burns something, and we don't know the offer, but they offered him something. And guess how fired up the fan base will be? Like, it can happen just like that. And I think that's what maybe Met fans are waiting for at this point, because it is annoying that nothing getting leaked out, because there's really nothing to talk about except, are they in on Burns? Exactly.
A ton of hypotheticals is what we could talk about. I think teams are going to start getting weary too of going up against Cohen if Cohen really wants the guy. I mean, Cohen really wanted Juan Soto.
Oh, yeah.
And no one thought that the Yankees were going to lose out to the Mets, and it was going to be a $50 million bid to lose out to the Mets. Yep. For the Mets to get Juan Soto, because Cohen really wanted him. So if the Mets really want a player like Corbin Burns, there's really not going to be nothing to stop them outside of him wanting to play in a certain area, or, wanting to go out west, which was reported that he would like to go out to where Arizona or California and be on the West Coast. Outside of that, there's really nothing that could stop Cohen and the Mets from offering the most money when it comes to these free agents.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I do wonder, would Cohen get frustrated, even though he hired Stearns to basically run things and not worry, and not really, set off to the side a little bit? Is Steve Cohen going to get a little bit annoyed with the fans' reaction? Because he's done this before, right? The Carlos Correa situation, stealing from the Giants in the middle of the night, like a lot of stuff like that, even though that didn't pan out, but he did that. The Yamamoto situation, when Steve Cohen wants to step in and overthrow or take control over a situation over Stearns, he's done it. Yamamoto, Soto, maybe he'll do it with Alonso at this point. I do wonder if Stearns if Cohen is like, you know what, let's just get Corbin Burns in here. David, I love you. I think you do a great job, but let me take control of this one, right? Let me get the deal done. And maybe that's kind of, a little detriment to Stearns, where I think he's too methodical. I think he's too smart for his own good sometimes. And he always worry about the risk and not worry about the reward more. Because at some point, to be a championship team, you have to take risk, right? The Dodgers took a risk with Glasnow with his injuries, right? Blake Snell, the 5-inning pitcher that he is, they taken a risk hoping that he can still be the guy he is without getting injured, right? They've taken risk. And I feel like teams that have been to a World Series or have won a World Series has taken risk, big risk, right? Just look for the Mets and Scherzer, trading them to the Rangers to get Acuna, Verlander for Gilbert and Clifford, right? Those were risks by those teams. And at the end of the day, it worked out for the Rangers, even though Scherzer really didn't help the cause, but it worked out at some level. And I feel like sooner or later, David Stearns has to take that big risk. And re-signing Alonso is not a big risk, right? Even if he finds a way to give him a 7-year deal because other teams are bidding against for Pete Alonso, that's not a risk to me. you're re-signing your player. That's not a risk. That should have been almost a guarantee, or expected. A risk is signing Burns for 8 years, knowing you're probably going to get 4 to 5 of his best years, and the last 3 are probably going to be an issue. I think that's what I'm leaning towards at this point, where it's like David Stern, at some point you have to take a risk, and nobody's going to be mad that you take a risk. It's okay. Even if it doesn't work out, you tried. And I feel like because we've got burned before, Met fans are still hesitant of doing these type of deals because they've got burned before. Jason Bay, right? Great example. Scherzer, Verlander, right? Just because those didn't work out doesn't mean Juan Soto won't work out. Doesn't mean that Burns won't work out. At some point, you got to start taking risk here, because you know what? Maybe one of those, maybe even more of those risks actually work out, and you'll hoist in a trophy in October, and then it's all worth it, Anthony.
I think that history shows that the most riskiest signings to make are the starting pitchers.
Sure.
They play once a day. Even the relievers can be a little risky, but not as much to a starting pitcher, because the starting pitcher is going to get over 100, sometimes close to $200 million. Those are the riskiest plays you can make when it comes to these signings and detrimenting your team for the future. So I think that's why David Stearns is so weary of them. I mean, look at what Luis Severino got. He got that 3-year, $60-something million. I don't know if any Met fan, and you could tell me in the chat if you guys wanted to bring Severino back, would you have brought him back for that contract? I don't think so. But then, like, where do you, like, the pitching market is just now so expensive that it's hard to, come up with these guys. Like, to me, if let's say that there was, the Mets had Sevy for another year, Minaya, Senga, and okay, they were going to try Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes was the one guy they were going to try. Then I would say, you know what? Let's take the huge risk on Corbin Burns and give him the 8 for 200, because he's the last piece to the rotation that's needed. With the rotation the way it is now, it's a little harder to do that, to risk 8 years on a guy like him. I liked the way that Carlos was saying, and that we've been talking about, is to do a short-term but more money on a yearly basis for a starting pitcher. And the thing is, too, they have to develop some of these starting pitchers in their minor leagues. They just have not been good, right? Well, how much did we hear about Mike Vassell, and who else did we hear? Eric Orzi and Dom Hamill. Now 2 of those guys are gone. Yep. Rule 5 draft, and one got traded for Jose Siri.
Yep.
So they got to develop some of their own pitchers as well, so that they can go out and spend a whole bunch of money on specific free agents. And like I said in the beginning, David Stearns is never going to get credit for any big free agent signing. It's always going to go to Steve Cohen, because he's the one with the money, and David Stearns is just going to get credit for these little trades and these little depth moves. That's just gonna be how it is, unfortunately. We won't know. Like, let's say they bring in Bregman. Is that because of David Stearns, or is that because of Steve Cohen? People are going to say
that would be a David Stearns move, to be quite honest with you.
To bring in Bregman?
Move Vientos to first base. Yep. To move Vientos to first base, and Bregman, that has Stearns written all over it, because he likes those type of players. He likes those Bregman types, right? He talks about home runs a lot, but he also talks about run prevention. Bregman is an elite third baseman, right? He is better than Vientos, even though Vientos has shown himself to be, probably more than above average. Bregman is elite. And he'll talk about run prevention with Alex Bregman. He'll say Bregman can still hit 25 home runs, bat you 270, and, be a gap-to-gap hitter. And, I don't know if you saw this, and with Bregman, his StatCast with home runs, he would have had 4 to 5 more home runs at Citi Field than he did in Houston. And you would think, wow, that's crazy. He's a complete, almost a 100%, he's about 90% pull hitter. Right. But he hits a lot of those balls to left center. And, after those Crawford boxes, it jerks out to a deeper ballpark in Houston. And he loses a lot of home runs there and got balls caught at the warning track, or they hit off the wall, off that high wall. those balls would be out at Citi Field. So those 25 home runs can lead to 30 home runs just based on that. And I'm sorry, if you pull down the left field line more often than not, you're hitting that ball out of Citi Field. All right. I know it's not Yankee Stadium, the Little League ballpark that it is, but if you hit the balls down the line at Citi Field, the balls are going out. Like, I understand it's Cavendish from left center field to right center field at Citi Field, but Houston left center field is monstrous along with the high wall. So, I'm not saying that Bregman's going to come here, hit 280, hit 35, 32 home runs, and knock in 95 to 100 RBIs. But there is a possibility there because me and Chris talked about the lineups with the Astros, and we always talk about Pete getting protection. Alex Bregman was hitting behind Alvarez. So he didn't have a ton of protection. What if he has Juan Soto batting behind him, or Pete Alonso batting behind him, or, in the middle of that 5 to 6 guys in the lineup? He might see better pitches. He actually might be better, along with the elite difference and the run prevention that David Stearns talked about till the cows came home last year. And I think that still lives today on December 18 with David Stearns. Run prevention is a huge thing. And I wouldn't be shocked if somebody offers Pete Alonso a 7-year deal worth whatever type of money. Stearns is not going there. I'm breaking it to everybody. He's not going more than 6 years for Pete Alonso. I'm telling you that right now. And that's even if he goes to the Yankees. Unless Steve Cohen jumps in and says, I need Pete Alonso back, I can't let him go to the Yankees, then Steve Cohen will do it. But if it's up to David Stearns, he would sign Bregman, move Vientos to first before he signs Pete Alonso for 7+ years.
I feel like I feel like he's just not going to get those years. And I think it's because the Mets had already offered him that 7 for 156,
Correct.
right? 7 for 156. So I don't think he's going to get that at all because, one, the Mets are not going to give it to him. Who else is going to give it to him after the season that he had last year? Throw the playoffs out. You got to still count the regular season as well. He wasn't a clutch hitter at all during the season. And then you even go back further, and he's been in a decline. That's all I've been hearing. He's been in a decline since 2022. After he had that really, breakout 22 season, he has been in a decline in 2023 and 2024. I don't think he gets more than 5 years. I honestly don't. I would be shocked if he gets more than that, especially after the Mets. He turned down the Mets 7-year deal. He's going to get, I'm going to say, 175 probably. I don't even know if he breaks 200.
No, I don't think he's going to break 200. But what you always worry about, and I think this is what Met fans are worrying about, if Christian Walker comes off the board, say he goes to the Yankees or anywhere for that matter, and there's a couple of teams that don't have a first baseman, and they get desperate, and they're willing. We've seen it with Max Fried. Who would have thought Max Fried would have got 8 years? We were thinking 5 years, possibly 6, nothing more than that. I feel like if there's a desperate team out there, there's no will. You just don't know where they're going to go. And, if a team like the Cubs saying, you know what, we just got Tucker. We don't know if we're going to re-sign him after the end of the year. Let's bring in Pete Alonso, first base. Who cares about the money? Who are the years? Let's get him. Let's get it even better. Let's see if we can win a World Series with the 1 year of Tucker. And Tucker even talked about an extension. I know that's crazy to sound, but the Cubs have been wanting Pete Alonso for 3 years now. And if they end up being desperate and they do it, can you really blame the Mets for going 7 years for whatever type of money? Like, I'm not going to blame the Mets for not doing that. I know Met fans would be like, oh, how can you let another homegrown player go? Well, it's not the end of the world, right? I think we lose focus on, oh my God, we can't win without Pete Alonso, and you could win in other ways. Not saying Pete Alonso couldn't help the team. Of course he can. But there's a possibility that there's going to be a desperate team out there where Pete Alonso, who said he's going to make the final call to the Mets when he gets an offer and from another team, and if the Mets say, what's the offer? He's like, 7 years, $190 million. They're going to be like, good luck. Good luck to you and your wife. Enjoy wherever you go, and go get a stopgap guy or go sign a Christian Walker. or get Bregman and bring Vientos to first base.
I think this is a similar situation to DeGrom, where they know the amount of money that they are going to offer, and that's going to be it, right? So
That's scary for a lot of Met fans.
Yeah, they already offered him the 7,156 or whatever it was. He said no, so now that offer is now off the table, and he's gonna get a lot less than that. I don't think they want to go anywhere past 5 years with some of these players who are not under a specific age, especially with not knowing if Juan Soto is going to opt out of his contract. Now, I just brought up the list here of the first basemen that are available through free agency. Christian Walker is at number 1. This is by WAR. He's got 6.8 WAR, 34 years old. He declined the qualifying offer, which means if you sign him, you're losing a draft pick. Pete Alonso, that won't count for because he's on the Mets. He's got a 5 WAR. Then you go to Carlos Santana, 4.5 WAR, 39 years old. You're probably only giving a 1-year deal to him. And then that brings in the guy that everybody's been talking about on my social media, and that's been Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Now, I don't know if that's a trade that you could do mid-season or you just wait to sign him in the offseason, but he declined $400 million from Toronto. Like, is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. worth $400 million to you guys in the chat? Like, let me know about that. Because
is Soto worth 765? You can talk about that with anybody. Is McAfee worth 218? Is Garrett Cole worth 365? Who knows? Probably not. Even Aaron Judge is probably not worth the money he got, with the years. You could say that with everybody. It's just a matter of, are you willing to do it? You got to target your guy. And that's when you talk about risk, Ant,
Yeah. And you got Paul Goldschmidt. He's 37. He's got 4.4 WAR. Then it's a steep decline. Justin Turner, he's 40 years old. The Mets aren't going to bring him in. Donovan Solano, 37 years old. Connor Joe has a 2 WAR. He's 32 years old. Joey Gallo, absolutely not. Anthony Rizzo is like a worst case scenario, right? And then you got Patrick Wisdom, Ty France, Josh Bell, Yuli Gurriel, who's 40 freaking 1. We had G-Man Choi on this team already. He's not going to make the roster. Rowdy Tellez, no. Gavin, there's not that many options at first base. So that the Mets have to really decide here. And like you said, if someone like Christian Walker goes off the board, or even a Carlos Santana, to me is the final spot where I'll go. I don't even know if I'll go Paul Goldschmidt. I feel like Carlos Santana is that like final piece that if he goes, then I start getting worried about first baseman, because then the Mets have to really make a decision. And I don't really know if I want Mark Vientos to be playing first base. If you're talking about run prevention.
Yeah, absolutely. But see, that's the thing though. It's like, if Christian Walker goes off the board, guess who Pete Alonso has over the barrel? It's the Mets.
Yeah.
Because Pete Alonso can be like, well, you know what? I got 3 other teams that don't have Christian Walker and need a first baseman. You're not the only one. And that's when the price might get a little crazy, and the years might get a little crazy. And that's why I don't understand. Now, again, we still don't know any type of offers that Stearns have offered. He could offer to multiple players already. But saying he doesn't, why not just be aggressive? And, offer a 6-year deal to Pete Alonso for 175, 180, whatever it might be. See if he takes it. Or, for Burns, the same thing like we talked about earlier, or anybody else, right? But here's the thing with Pete Alonso, with David Stearns. Anytime Pete Alonso comes up, what does David Stearns always say? Well, we have to understand, we have to make sure that it's smart for the future, that it doesn't hurt us long term, right? He said that anytime in regards to Pete Alonso about long-term deals. So he's telling you that he's not giving him a 7-year deal. I mean, maybe the pressure might mount where Cohen takes over and says, screw it. But, undermining Stearns doesn't look good for Cohen, even though Met fans would be happy with Pete Alonso, right? What if Stearns' plan all along was, all right, you know what? Let's get Carlos Santana in here. Let's get a stopgap guy and go after Vlad Guerrero, or even trade for Vlad Guerrero. I know that's crazy to think that that's a possibility, but maybe Stearns can actually do that. and trade for Vlad Guerrero. I know some people be like, oh, how can you do that? Why would you do that? You got Pete Alonso here. You can argue if Pete Alonso is better than Vlad Guerrero, if Vlad Guerrero is better than Pete Alonso. I mean, you could debate that to the end of time. But it's not the worst thing in the world. And again, Pete Alonso on this team will help this team. Vlad Guerrero on this team helps the team. Now, I'm not going to tell you Carlos Santana is better than any of those guys, but depending on what the Mets do on the other end, you could still, because I mean, if you get a stopgap first baseman, your roster's basically done. Your lineup basically, right? I mean, you're not, all your positions are basically filled. Second base could be McNeil, could be Acuna. Maybe they trade for a starting pitcher or something like that. Who knows? But I do wonder if either it's going to be the pressure from Cohen to sign Pete Alonso, pressure from fans to sign Pete Alonso, or David Stern this whole time is saying, all right, we will take back Pete for, like you said, 5 years, 175, a similar deal that they offered during the offseason. Or they're saying, all right, we will give you this, Pete. That's all we're going. But if you're not going to take this, we're going to pivot to something else. And I think that's probably more of the conversation that's happening than people actually realize. Because every day you'll see on social media, what is everybody saying? Did the Mets sign Pete Alonso yet? Is Pete signed yet? And then here comes all the montages and all the videos of Pete Alonso walking up to the plate. How many montages you've seen with him hitting the home run in Milwaukee? Like hundreds of them every day. So it's getting to the point now where I think Steve Cohen is going to say, screw this. Stearns, deal with your projects. I'll worry about Pete Alonso. I think, and I feel like it's going to happen. And I don't care. Like, if you have to sign Pete Alonso to 10 years, I just don't care anymore. Years, money. If Steve Cohen's willing to pay it, who the hell am I or anybody else to say that it shouldn't be done?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all Cohen's money, so we're just like, go sign whoever. I know the Mets are trying to play the game here in the free agent market. I just don't want them getting played once these guys come off the board, right? Like when who was it that came off? Maybe it was Blake Snell, and that kind of raised the market for what Sean Manaea was going to get. And same thing with Luis Severino. Sometimes if you want a specific player, like what they did with Juan Soto, sometimes you just got to go out and get the job done and get the deal done. You're either going to pay a lot of money or, you're going to get screwed into paying even more money. So at some point, the Mets have to decide because, once Christian Walker goes off the board, like let's say Christian Walker goes off before Pete does, and he gets a contract that probably he doesn't deserve. That's probably a whole lot more money. That means Pete Alonso's value just went up. And now you're going to be paying even more for Pete Alonso. So at a certain point, you're going to have to make a decision here because there's not that many good free agent options outside of the ones that we discussed, the first few that we discussed. Yeah. So like you got to make a move at some point. Same thing with starting pitching too, right? Like if they're not getting Corbin Burns and then Corbin Burns signs for an even bigger deal than we thought he was going to get, well, now Manaea's profile and Flaherty's profile, all of those guys go up in price. And now you're going to pay even more for them. So figure out what you're going to do soon because, I mean, you just don't want to get got when it comes to free agency.
The Mets always talked about getting used, and Steve Cohen talked about not getting used. Well, it's not really them getting used at this point. That's them playing a waiting game, and it could burn them in the long run by either paying more years or more money or losing out on the guy as a whole, and you don't have anybody else to turn to. And now you got to be really creative here, which is a dangerous game to play. And, again, do we all believe that Pete Alonso will be back? I think we all have that feeling that he will be back for whatever price, whatever years. I mean, we can all debate that, but it's a feeling, right? I think there's more of a question mark or more questions in the rotation when it comes to who are they going to get than Pete Alonso coming back, right? I know Bregman is still an odd rumor linked to the Mets, but I think the Bregman situation is trying to put pressure on Pete Alonso. Because even though Bregman
Probably.
and Pete Alonso are Boris clients, you know, the Mets aren't stupid. If David Stearns talks to Boris and say, hey, listen, we're interested in Bregman here, you know, what do you think Boris is going to tell Alonso? Hey, the Mets might be thinking about Vientos at first and Bregman at third. And now Pete Alonso's like, oh, well, my market's going to go sideways or going to go different because there isn't a huge market for Pete Alonso. I think that's been established. You know, there is a possibility of Seattle, but if they don't shed payroll, they can't add that money for Pete Alonso to add that bat, which they desperately need. You know, the Cubs, you know, Michael Busch that I believe Easy was talking about is one of the Cubs prospects that they really like. You know, I don't know if they're necessarily desperate for Pete Alonso, but you know, that's basically, and obviously the Yankees, but I think a lot of people are thinking that the Yankees are going to get Christian Walker. That's been the talk. Let's say if the Yankees do get Christian Walker, Pete Alonso's market is very, very minimal. And that can either hurt him, which might hurt him, or it can also hurt the Mets as well, because you just never know. What if, you know, it takes one team that says, you know what, screw it. Here we go. We're going to get 8 years, $200 million for Pete Alonso. Now, that might blow all of us out of the water. But what the hell? You know, and then the Mets are very much in trouble because now you got to go to that Carlos Santana. Maybe you do have to sign Bregman now that maybe the Mets possibly didn't want to do and move Vientos to first base. And you don't want to put yourself in that scenario where you have to be forced to do that because you waited too long and didn't strike when the iron was hot.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at this list again, right? Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, 6.8 to 5.0 WAR, respectively. And then you go to third baseman, right? Alex Bregman, 8.6 WAR. Everybody else, extremely low, 2.9 and lower. So, you know, Bregman's going to become a hot commodity for whoever needs a third baseman.
Yeah.
He's already a World Series proven, a proven player.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he's been known to come up in the clutch. I know he had a down season last year, but he plays good defense. He's a Gold Glove type third baseman. So he's going to attract more of these type of, you know, deals, bigger deals out there. There's also, you know, I don't want him, but Nolan Arenado is on the trade block and he just declined a deal to go to Houston. So, you know, he's out there. I think the Mets were on his, no trade. He's not on. I don't think the Mets are on his no trade list.
Yeah, he wouldn't mind being sent to the Mets.
Right.
It's on his list. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, and that's the thing. Like, again, there's so many freaking question marks and so many different ways the Mets could go, even if it's not the popular way to go. And they can also put themselves in a corner where they have no choice but to do certain things they probably didn't want to do, but now they have to because they waited too long. And again, for all we know, there's offers on the table for Burns, Alonso, Bregman, who the hell knows? You know, and they're just seeing who bites first. We just don't know the offers yet, which has been a trend with the Mets, with anybody they've been interested in from the beginning of the offseason. It's a wait and see approach. And we're getting closer and closer until the holidays. I don't think much is happening during the week of Christmas or the week of the holiday. I don't think much is going to happen. A lot of people are going to be with their families, not really talking. I would be shocked. From the Monday of the week of Christmas, I don't think anything's really going to happen. It usually doesn't. You might get something on the weekend before Christmas.
Alex Reyes.
Yeah.
Alex Reyes.
Alex Reyes, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Pump your fist, guys. Get that jersey. But it's a wait and see approach at this point, and it's a frustrating one for fans. And before we end our stream, the very famous rapid fire time where we each ask each other a question, and the answer's got to come quick. And before we say that, I want to thank Anthony from Subway To Shea for joining the hot stove as Chris is on vacation right now. And I'm going to have a couple of other guests throughout next week or so to fill in for Chris. And I want to thank you. Appreciate you spending more than an hour with us when nothing's really going on except for Alex Reyes. So it's not easy to talk about for an hour, but I appreciate you. being here and hanging out with all of us, even though they like to disagree with most of our takes, but that's okay. We love it. We love it. So, rapid fire time. I got a question for you, and
Sure.
I had three of them, but I gotta break it. I gotta pick one. So the one that I really would love for you to answer is, if Pete Alonso is not a New York Met, who do the Mets sign for first base, or do you think they pivot to Alex Bregman to put him at third base? It's kind of open-ended question, but a two-part question at the same time.
I think that they would pivot to Bregman, even though I really don't want to put this guy at first base in Vientos. I like him to get more seasoning at third base, but maybe they could do a Alex Bregman and sign a Carlos Santana and then have Vientos DH. Then you don't have to worry about bringing a guy like Jesse Winker back and all that stuff. But if I'm doing a stopgap first baseman, it's not to get Ryan Clifford ready. It's to go after like Vladimir Guerrero in the offseason. I'm not waiting anymore. Like the time to wait for these guys to come up, I'm over that. So if they're doing a stopgap, if they don't sign Pete and they're doing this stopgap first baseman, then I'm in the offseason, I'm going after Vlad Guerrero Jr. I'm not waiting for like Clifford to get here.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think they would pivot. I think the pivot away from Alonso is Bregman. And if that's the case, if the Mets don't re-sign Pete Alonso, I think it kind of makes, because the stopgap is interesting, but I don't think it helps you enough. Where I think Vientos, even though it's probably not the best case scenario, Vientos has played first base in the minors, played a little bit, very little with the Mets in the majors. And, when you get a guy like Bregman at third base, the defense is going to be there. The pretty decent offense is going to be there for Bregman. It's not Alonso at first with the 40-plus home runs. And, you can add that to the lineup. But it is an interesting dynamic if that happens. And if they do get Bregman and put Vientos at first base, there's a pretty good chance that Vientos could be leaning towards being a DH after the 2025 season, because Vladimir Guerrero is going to be the number one target for the New York Mets at first base. And that's where it's going to be a crazy shift in a dynamic situation with the New York Mets if Pete Alonso was not signed with the New York Mets. Ant, you got any rapid fire question for me?
I got one for you. How does this rotation round out? Who, by the time we get to spring training, who are the five in the rotation? Or should I say the beginning of the year? Is that better, or would you rather
whatever you want? Yeah, whatever makes it easier. We can do the beginning of the year.
That's all right. Fine. Who's the starting five?
So, do you want my choices, or do you want?
How about we'll do your choices, and then if you feel, and then what you think. Yeah.
All right. So Edwin Diaz is going to be in the rotation.
You'll light up the chat real quick saying that.
Yeah, exactly. I heard our Nimmo has a nasty curveball, so you can put him in the rotation for a couple of days a week. All right, I'm sorry. All right, so my choice let's go with a 5-man, because I'm not going to do a 6-man, because I that seems like it's still up in the air if they have to get enough pitchers for that. I'm going to go. All right, for my choice, it's going to be Burns, Minaya, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Frankie Montas. That would be my very, very good additions to this rotation. I think that's a very decent rotation, because Kodai Senga as a number 3 is a hell of a lot better than Kodai Senga as a 1 or a 2.
Which means Clay Holmes is in the bullpen.
Oh, yeah, I still think that's going to happen. I think that's just a way to get Clay Holmes to sign here and, give him the hope of spring training. And when he gets rocked as a starter, they're like, oh, we tried. Go to the bullpen. You're the bridge to Diaz. I think that's going to happen. So that's what I would do. What I think Stearns is going to do is going to be hopeful for Sasaki, but not going to get him. Going to sign Buehler and Minaya. and Kodai Senga is going to be your ace. And that annoys me, but I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to be, again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, kind of like what Saint Vintage has here. He's got Senga, Minaya, Peterson, Bueller, Montas, Holmes as rotation. I wouldn't be shocked if that's it.
Yeah, and you know what? Too many question marks for me in that rotation. You can't tell me you're contending in 2025 and actually say you're going for it in 2025 like everybody said you were, even the organization, and give me that rotation. Now, can Minaya be as good as he was last year? Absolutely. Can Bueller shown what he did in the playoffs and take it to the season? Absolutely. Can Kodai Senga be healthy and be good, be very good? Sure. Absolutely. Can David Peterson be solid? Sure. But every one of those come with a big ifs. And I would have to grade them if that's the rotation. Even if they re-sign Pete Alonso, probably a B minus, even with the Juan Soto addition. Like, because, why spend all that money for Juan Soto? Bring back Pete Alonso for a pretty decent deal. You basically got your core. You added a great piece to your lineup in Juan Soto, and then half-ass a rotation that is way too scary, in my opinion, where if things don't work out with even one of those guys, especially at the top of the rotation, guess what you're going to be searching for at the trade deadline? A top line starter where you're going to have to give up prospects anyway. And I think that's where we're going to, unfortunately, have to deal with, unless Minaya and Kodai Senga just are outstanding and we don't have to worry about it. But again, that's a huge if. And that would be my thing. And I'd even put Luis Castillo in the mix, because until David Stearns actually trades top prospects, I'm not going to do it. I can't make myself believe it and put it in my dream rotation or my want of a rotation. If he does it, I'll wipe my hands clean and say, David Stearns, I'm sorry. But until he actually does it, I can't get along with it.
I got to say this, and this goes back to the first baseman talk, because I was thinking about this while we were talking earlier about, the options and what to do at first base. Mario Consiglio says, hey, Rob, would you sign Walker and Bregman, meaning Vientos is the DH? To me, if you sign Alex Bregman, I feel like you got to sign a first baseman, like a defensive type first baseman, whether it's Walker or Carlos Santana. It was mentioned, I don't remember where it was mentioned, on what podcast that I was listening to, that Pete Alonso has a really good scoop rate when it comes to being at first base. And that's something that's very vital. I know he can't throw to second on the, I know he struggles with that. But for most of the time, he's scooping up these throws from whoever the third baseman is. And I think that is very important. If you're giving me Bregman, I think you also have to give me a first baseman too. Obviously, it doesn't have to be Pete, although I would love them to go do that double spending like that. But if you were to get a Christian Walker or Carlos Santana and then have Vientos be your DH, I can get down with something like that.
Absolutely. Because, if Christian Walker, who's a 25, 30 home run guy, Bregman's a 25 home run guy, that's 55 home runs added to your lineup. That's 10 more home runs than Pete Alonso. So that even lengthens your lineup even more. And, I think Stearns would do that because he's not afraid to give in long-term deals to position players, in my opinion, because they're more likely to not get hurt over pitchers.
Yeah.
So if you do that, oh boy, I tell you, that's not so bad.
No, and they all season long, going all the way back to when Vientos was practicing with Francisco Lindor, they got me all hyped throughout the whole season with Vientos playing third base. And then now to have him move and learn first base, I can't get, it's either he's going to play third base to me or he's going to be the DH. Those are the two options for me. I don't want him playing first. I want someone that's going to be able to scoop the ball. And I think Carlos said it was Sean Casey on MLB Network who said it. I thought I don't have MLB Network. Maybe I heard it in one of the little clips or something. I thought I heard it in a podcast, but if that's where he said it from, the guy has a really good scoop rate, and that's needed when you're playing first base. He's not a Gold Glover, but he plays pretty good first base to me for what is needed from Pete Alonso. The thing he struggles with is throwing to second on the double play. That's the thing that worries me the most about him. But besides that, I think he's fine.
Yeah, he's not elite by any means. You know, his footwork is still a little worrisome to me. I think he still tends to go in the hole a little further than I like. Like he still doesn't. I don't think he or reads where his second baseman is playing sometimes, where he might go a little bit too far out between the second and first base hole and then undecided to get the first base or go for the ball. And that kind of leaves the pitcher in a situation where obviously any ball hit to the right side, the pitcher should be gunned into first base. But we have seen that in the past where pitchers don't cover first base when the ball's hit to the right side. And I think, and that's not Pete Alonso's fault if the pitcher doesn't cover. That's not on him. But I do feel, again, Pete Alonso's not a butcher at first base. That's understandable. But again, if you can get Bregman in there and they sign Christian Walker and put Vientos as the DH, I'm sorry, that lightens your lineup a lot more. That's 55 home runs added to your lineup compared to 45 from Pete Alonso. And that's if he actually does that, because he didn't do it last year. And again, you know, we like to go on career stats. But again, I don't like looking at that. I don't care what somebody did in 2023, right? It doesn't matter to me, right? He was one of the worst middle of the lineup guys with runners in scoring position last year. That is a huge concern. When he didn't hit a home run with runners on, he didn't drive him in any other way. That's concerning to me. And Bregman and Walker has established themselves as somebody that have done that, and they've done it better than Pete Alonso. And I know Bregman can get those RBIs without hitting the home run because he's done it. And the same thing with Christian Walker, right? He does hit a ton of home runs, but he also puts the bat on the ball. He also is an RBI guy without just the home runs. And Pete Alonso was that in his first couple of seasons. And he strived away from that a little bit for whatever reason. Maybe he became a little bit more pull happy. I love Pete Alonso going to the right center field gap. That's when he's at his best. But, you know, it's going to be so interesting because if Pete Alonso is not a New York Met, this fan base might have pitchforks going to Citi Field the way they're acting right now on social media.
I think it all depends on who is the replacement, right? Like if they sign Bregman, are Met fans going to be as upset if they don't sign Alonso? I think if they don't sign Alonso and they don't make any other move for the offense, I think then there's going to be a lot of fans that are upset. I remember towards the end of the season, a lot of fans did not want Pete Alonso back. It took that playoffs for them to turn that around. But he's on my wish list. I still want Pete Alonso here. I want Minaya here. I want them to trade for a starting first base, a starting pitcher, and I want Iglesias and Winker back. Those are my moves. Maybe Stanek as well for the bullpen. But those are the moves that I would make personally. And then for Pete, I mean, I don't go more than 5 years for Pete. That's just I won't go past that.
Yeah, exactly. So we spoke for an hour and a half because Anthony doesn't want to leave. But
I'm loving the chat here. The chat's got the chat. We got a good chat going tonight.
It's been blowing up. We have a lot of different opinions, obviously, right? Everybody is going to have different reasons why they say what they say, including us, right? We're wrong more often than not, right? But it's great to have opinions. And you know what? When things start to move, because obviously we got to add to this roster. When they start slowly adding or hopefully quickly adding, we'll see where this lineup and where this rotation and where this roster is getting closer and closer. We're 50 days from spring training and we're 100 days from opening day. So it's going to come, we know when the holidays are done, it happens like that. And we're in pitchers and catchers.
Can I make a quick prediction?
Hell yeah.
I do predict that the Mets will have a full Major League 26-man roster by opening day. You can count.
God, I hope so. At the end of the day, get your arm ready, Ant. You're going to be in the rotation tomorrow.
I would take half of that contract right
yeah, right?
To pitch in this
Hell yeah, give me some tickets for free. I'll be happy, right?
Yeah, you see how some of these pitchers are getting all this money and they can't pitch? Yeah. I'll take that money.
Exactly.
I'll learn how to throw a knuckleball.
Exactly, right? Hey, if Dickie can do it, why can't we?
Yeah.
Right? So, all right, guys. So that was another episode of Mets Hot Stove. We're gonna thank Ant again for filling in for Chris as Chris is on vacation. Subscribe to Subway to Shea. Anthony,
Yes.
what's going on with your channel? And let everybody know what's going on, buddy.
Well, right now I'm doing weekly shows. I usually do them Sunday morning during the off season. It seems to get a lot of steam, especially right before the football starts for the day. I don't have any guests planned up yet, but we will be talking about what we talked about today. Got to talk about the first base situation. Is it Pete? Is it Christian Walker? Carlos Santana out there? Like, who is it going to be Vientos? What are they going to decide to do? And then we'll probably kind of rehash of what this rotation could possibly look like. I'd like to have some news going into Sunday, something. I know you said no signings through the holidays. I feel like there's going to be a signing, whether it's a pitcher or this. I don't think this Pete situation is going to be done until after New Year's, but I feel like a pitcher might be coming soon. I don't know who it is. It'd be nice if it was Manaya, but we'll wait and see. But yeah, like follow me on Instagram, TikTok, X at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Rivera 86, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're at 731, I think, right now, working our way to 750, and then ultimate goal is to try to get to that 1,000 mark if we could possibly get there.
Absolutely. So make sure we got to get them. We got to get them to 1,000, guys. Get them to 1,000 on YouTube, and then all bets are off. And Subway to Shea is going to be running. All right, and so I do appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. Just an hour and a half of Mets talk, and be safe. Have a great holiday if I don't speak to you again. And guys, thank you in the chat. Another Mets Hot Stove in the books. Episode 17 already of Mets Hot Stove. We're going to probably do God knows how many more for the rest of the year. But let's go Mets, guys. Have a great holiday, and we'll see you next time on the Mets Hot Stove Show right here on the channel. Have a good night, guys. Let's go Mets.
City lights in the dead of night, full of echo.